Well, welcome everyone for our Dean's Forum this morning. Thank you all for being here on this lovely October morning. I am so excited. I'm just excited in general. Not only is it wonderful that our clergy team is growing, which I think helps us as a cathedral in so many ways. I cannot say enough wonderful things about Megan Allen Miller, who has already made a wonderful impact on our staff, and I'm grateful that you all we are beginning a season where you are going to get to know her as well and see what a special priest she is. So I'm gonna get started with an introduction, if that's all right, and then we'll start putting you on the hot seat. The Reverend Megan Allen Miller joined Trinity Cathedral on October 1st as our priest associate for community outreach and pastoral care. She comes to us after serving as a diocesan curate at St. Andrew's and at All Saints Episcopal Churches in Toledo, Ohio. Before that, and before seminary, Megan worked as the director of the Institute at St. John's in Ohio City. Talk a bit about that. She joins us on this clergy team, and she will be doing all the clergy things. As a priest, you're a utility player. We do all the things, as you are already going to see. But in particular, Megan will be responsible for strengthening our pastoral care and deepening our presence in the local community. And today we'll be talking, learning about Megan and what brought her to ministry and what brought her to Trinity. But we'll also have some time in Q&A later as we talk about what are the particularities of her role at Trinity, and how can that help us to really follow our vision and our mission. So we're going to start by Megan talking about, I didn't mention Lindsay here. So Megan is also married to Lindsay, yes. And to some of you all have had a chance to meet, and we look forward to getting to know Lindsay as well. So let's start by talking about your work most recently at St. Andrew's and All Saints in Toledo. And some of us are going to know about those churches and some of us are not. So what did you love about those communities? Where were you challenged there? What did you learn? Tell us about those churches.
So as BJ said, I was the diocesan curate, so serving at St. Andrew's, which is a pretty mid-sized parish, predominantly white community, and All Saints Episcopal Church, which is one of our 3 historic Black parishes. And so I guess I would say the greatest joy and the greatest challenge was the same thing. So part of my job was not only continuing to learn my sea legs on me as a recently ordained person, but also really having an opportunity to see what it looks like to collaborate and grow in partnership without one community overtaking another.
Wow, yeah.
So what developed was, how do we do formation together while keeping the legacies and the heritages of 2 separate churches alive and well? And so that is a lot of what I did.
Right.
So I split my time 50-50 between the 2 parishes. I worked with Bridget Coffey, who's the rector at St. Andrew's. And that really, I feel like I should be saying more, but that really is kind of like the
Then you probably should.
Well, what that really was, it was the greatest joy. I am a collaborative worker by nature. So for me, it was a great joy and a challenge of learning, particularly with the dynamics of race, which are real in our world, but also real in our church.
Right.
And so those were some of the dynamics and some of the things that I was asked to learn about, work on, bring to fruition as best as one can during my time in Toledo.
It's happening a lot more over the last generation or so, where multiple churches, because of where they are in their life cycle, are either outright combined or they share a clergy person, for reasons that you can imagine. And in one way, it's sort of like, well, that's the obvious thing to do. But if those two parishes were equal in every way, it would still be hard. Because every church has its own culture. We have these things called vestries that mean that, which is an organizing, you can't just automatically change something, it's got to go through there. So there's not just the governance structure, it's also the culture. Then when you layer into that issues of size, of privilege, of race, of kind of historic investment or investment and disinvestment.
Right.
How do you begin to navigate and hold those two things together, those many things together, while still serving as a priest to all of them?
Well, the first thing that rises for me is I'm super grateful and lucky that I wasn't doing it by myself. So there are people out there, and in a lot of places they're called clusters, so creating clusters of churches, right? One clergy person for 2 or 3 places, and a lot of times people are doing that by themselves. I could never imagine. I'm a social person. I could never imagine doing that by myself. So I think part of what was really helpful for me is that there was already an anchor in one of those places. So I, to a certain degree, could focus more of what we would call congregational development, or doing particular reflecting work with All Saints in particular, as a church that hadn't had a clergy person in over a decade. They had had some.
For guys had been that long.
Yeah, so they had been completely lay-led and doing their own thing, and there's a particular gift in serving with a group of people who have such resiliency, and at the same time, a continuation of really kind of helping them reflect on giving themselves space to see where they are in reality, but also part of my work was doing a lot of breathing work.
Right.
As the Black community in general, but particularly in our Black communities, specifically at All Saints, they were just so, we don't have a choice.
Right.
We need to pick up, we need to keep moving. And I think one of the gifts for myself and for them is that we could really kind of slow down. I could give some of the leadership a break,
Right.
which is real for us and for the people we are serving with. But then take the time to say one of the things that will make us stronger is giving ourselves an opportunity to sit down, to breathe deeply, and let ourselves grieve. Grieve not only what they experience in society, grieve what they've experienced in the church. In some ways, it's not much better than society, but also to grieve not having clergy, to grieve some diocesan relationships from the past that were just different. So while Bridget was kind of anchoring St. Andrews, and I was learning at St. Andrews, a lot of my own learning and gift of grieving and sitting in grief was used with them. That I think was, again, one of the gifts. I think, to speak to your question, that acknowledges the whole, while giving them the space to be who they are. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Let's go back to before you were ordained.
Okay.
I want to talk about a little about St. John's and your experience there. And I realize that there have been many iterations of ministry at St. John's ever since. So I want to acknowledge that is a moment in time.
Yes.
But that is a place that is, I think, very special to many of us at Trinity. And I'm just eager to hear what your work was when you were at the Institute at St. John's.
Yeah.
What you learned from that, and it sounds like, did that help you to discern a call to ordained ministry?
Yes, and so the work, the multifaceted questions. So the work that I did at St. John's was split 50-50. I both was the director of programming and the director of facilities, which for me was the perfect job. I have
So you have facilities background too, eh? Fascinating.
Which merged my passions in schooling. So I have my bachelor's degree in history and museum studies, and I have a master of public administration. And so those two things really came together perfectly there. So most of my time was spent going out into the community, meeting the different organizations, particularly in Ohio City, but it could have been outside of that, and learn who our neighbors are and find ways where we could support each other. Mainly the way that St. John's was helping to support other organizations was by saying, it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, something should be happening, who can we partner with? Who can we bring into our space? Who's doing what out there? And then the unglamorous side is, we're not ADA compliant. What are we gonna do about that? What can we do about that? Because sometimes it's hard.
Right.
But when I was working at St. John's, again, I feel like this is a theme in my life, everyone take note, I wasn't working alone. If you know Reverend Kelly Augenbaugh, I was working with her. So while I was focused on the programming and the building, she was kind of focused on more of the quote unquote spiritual. There was a group of people meeting for evening prayers, you know, a couple times a month, and Kelly was leading those groups. And I have a lot of gratitude for Kelly. We were very good friends still. And a lot of our conversations there, where I very much wanted to be a part of what was going on spiritually, but that was not my lane, was really helpful to me in kind of learning. At that time, I was already in the process, the ordination process. And so it was just a constant discernment. And so having a partner like Kelly to discern some of what I was feeling, where I'm like, I love what I do, and I love what you do.
Right. I love you doing.
So she and I had some really great conversations that helped me flesh out where I felt God was calling me in my own call to ministry, which honestly was not parochial, which has changed well.
A cathedral is in the middle place, I think, in many ways. Yeah. Well, and I think ministry can be lonely. You know, so many of our colleagues are at churches that, and they are solo clergy, and maybe they live far away from other colleagues, and you know, if not everybody, you know, in many ways we're at a different end of the spectrum. You know, not everybody kind of vibes off of this kind of activity, but I think we as clergy here do. At the same time, you just, I think, expressed what a diocese can do in terms of bringing people together so that ministry that could be lonely is actually collegial, and by being collegial, has the potential to be that much more effective.
Absolutely.
I'm going to keep going back in time.
Okay.
This is as far as we go, and then we'll start looking forward again. I want to talk about your spirit, your church and faith upbringing in Akron, and how, you know, what did you treasure about that, and how did that begin to point you on a process towards ordained ministry?
Yeah. So how far back are we going?
You tell me. Now it's up to you at this point.
Well, in 1990, I was baptized.
All right.
I grew up Roman Catholic, went to private school my whole life, including my undergrad. So I had a very both deep experience and a challenging experience in the church in general. And I came into the Episcopal Church when I was in graduate school. And can you ask your question again?
What? I just want to learn about your church upbringing in Akron and how that led you to ordained ministry, or to discernment.
Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you for the reminder.
So the Episcopal Church that I started going to when I came into the church was Church of Our Savior in Akron, if you know Reverend Deborah Bennett. She is the priest that was there. She had just gotten there. And one of the things that was really important to me was I didn't want to be received into the Episcopal Church unless I knew that this was the church that I wanted to be a part of, not because of a specific church or community, because we can go to a church and say, I love these people, I love this place. You move, which is what I did,
Right.
And you're like, I don't like this, like how was this working? That was not my experience, but just as an example. So I really took my time. I threw myself, it felt right, not by pressure or anything, into some of the ministries that I really enjoyed. One of their strongest ministries that they still have is a food ministry. And they had dinner once a week, all month long. And that particular ministry, for me, not only was something that I just like felt drawn towards, but the way that they do it. So dinner is served, but you serve yourself and you sit with the guests. And so once dinner was all out, there was no one in the kitchen. Everyone was out with the people, sitting with the people. And it really gave me a sense of like, this is how the world should be, kind of feeling and situation. And I think that was really my draw into wanting to know more and learning more. I'm also very inquisitive. I ask a lot of questions. So every time I saw Mother Deborah, I was constantly asking her questions about the church. Who are these Episcopalians? Growing up Catholic, you learn that no one else exists. So I'm like, who are these? What is this? Help me understand. Is it the same? Is it different? I'm a very serendipitous kind of person, so it also wasn't lost on me. I started graduate school in the history department, and what I studied was the American Revolutionary War as a religious persecution against Anglicans.
Wow.
So I knew a lot about the Anglican Church, but not in modernity.
Right.
And so like I said, every time I saw her, I would just pull her aside and I'd be like, so this is how it was at this time. How is it now? What has changed? And literally, in a good way, just completely sucked in.
Yeah. I hope we can have a class about the Revolutionary War and the Anglican experience.
I mean, whether it's good or bad, guns are a hot topic, but I can tell you one thing I remember, which means it's a core memory, is reading about how Anglican clergy would preach with a gun under their cushion.
Really?
Just in case. The end.
I want to hear more about this. So as we, let's turn a little bit towards some of Trinity's ministry right now. I want to talk about pastoral care for a moment. Tell me a little bit about what pastoral care means to you, Megan.
I think in its simplest form, pastoral care is coming alongside and being with. And it is both as simple as and as challenging as allowing someone to be their full self in the moment that you're with them, and whatever they're bringing, because we are all complex human beings, and we can bring a lot at any moment, including me. So I think at its simplest, right, but usually what sounds really simple is never that easy. But that's what pastoral care is for me.
How can a community, any church, but in particular one like Trinity, how can we cultivate pastoral care as a part of our culture, as a way of mutual care throughout the whole community, as well as the particular care that we as clergy can offer?
Yeah. The first thing that rises for me is thinking about some of the ways that we can build relationship, which I think is always kind of that first step. It's a lot easier to create space for someone that you know, which oftentimes we want to greet all people.
Right.
But when you're learning how to do that, sometimes it's easiest to learn with people that you know. So what springs to my mind, which I'm still learning about all of you and all that we offer here, I think, well, what already happens here, the circles, the small groups, creating what can develop into intimate relationship, emotionally intimate relationships with other people, environments that encourage people as they feel comfortable and as they feel safe to be more like themselves. I do think that as folks, we hopefully are also able to model this and help people see what it looks like in action, while also recognizing that even as clergy folk, we are learning and growing, and everyone is constantly expanding. But I definitely, coming from a church planting background with a community of 8 people, I have learned, in my opinion, that really having opportunities to take pockets of small groups and allowing them to be together, eat together, pray together, learn together, is always a good way of helping to develop some of those skills. I'm also an intellectual, so if you would like any book recommendations, I don't discount books either, but for the true lived experience of it, that is something that I'm really glad to see happens at Trinity, and I can say other churches are trying to figure that out, like how to make small groups work in their context,
Right.
because there is a value. Like, we can see that there is a deep value in what small groups can bring to a community, especially small groups that at some point in time swap, mix, right? So you're not just you're not creating small communities within the cathedral congregation. You're having entry points of opportunities of meeting lots of people. And that's what I think is really important.
And I think that's a real opportunity for Trinity. I think that it's helpful to think about the difference. What is the difference between Trinity and what we might think of as a neighborhood church, where everybody lives within a mile of it, and we all run into each other at the grocery store, and we do run in. I see every one of y'all at Heinz, so I know to dress up. Right? Okay. One of those challenges for us, and because of the call them demands or opportunities of the cathedral, we get to do all these wonderful things, but that also means that we're covering a lot of ground, which means that it can be harder for us, and this is one of the reasons why we have welcomed you here, is because it gets harder to take that sort of slow time and say, this is an opportunity or an important moment. We're always there in emergencies, we've always been, but to be able to have a little bit more time is really important. And I do think it goes 2 ways as well, in that, for example, we know that our beloved Ginger Viticofer is retiring. We're gonna have to teach our congregation not to tell Ginger everything. And actually remember that we can't know things unless you tell us. We have a lot of antenna, but we can't pick up on everything. But I think part of that comes from, we signal our openness in a lot of ways. And I think that we want to continue to cultivate. You're saying a lot of things that I think help us to do that. I look forward to reading those books as well. Another part of your ministry with us is community ministry. tell me a little bit, just from, we've been through a search process together. You know who Trinity is, and Megan is in this moment where just stuff is coming at her all the time, so be patient. But what is your emerging vision for how Trinity's community and outreach ministries, and we'll talk about that word in a minute, can begin to develop from here, or continue to develop?
Well, my own thought process on that is still a work in progress. So I'm not quite sure I have a well-articulated answer to you.
And that's okay.
Hey, honesty is the best policy, right?
Yeah.
I will say, I think that there are a lot of connections that are already made that are really great. And I think I have started thinking about what other kinds of connections might be made, but I haven't had any conversations to know whether or not those have already been attempted or tried or how they work. So my brain is already thinking through what resources are here, what is around here, who is around here, and not trying to lean too heavily in things like my dad works for the food bank. And so it's like, what do we have a connection with them? Can we make a connection with them? I already have an inroad there.
Right.
So I'm not sitting around not doing anything most of the time.
It also, I think it's helpful for us to remember, and I think for everybody here to remember, that it takes a long time for a ministry leader to really get comfortable and settled in. There are some industries I hear, like, you can leave one job and start your new place a week later, and all of a sudden it happens in baseball all the time. but I mean, it really does take a handful of years before you're really kind of comfortable in your place. And so I think a lot of trust building helps. And to me, it's important that what we're doing is we're doing that kind of discernment work, pacing along the way. And there's a lot of work that's gone into each of these ministries before, up till now. But now I think we're really eager to hear, this is a discernment and a spirit-led process. And we know that God is going to speak through you in ways that we hadn't heard yet. So that we're open to, we want to see where that goes. Let's talk, we've had a little bit of conversation around the word outreach.
Yes.
And it's a word that signals something to a lot of us in terms of, it says hands-on ministry. It says our compassion and our active care for the community beyond our doors. It can also land in sort of a top-down thing, like we're in great shape and we are doing outreach for you. And then there's also just a practical, it's a familiar word. And so as we talk about the difference between words like outreach, words like partnership, do those words matter, and what comes up for you with each of them?
Yeah, I definitely think the words matter. Hopefully in getting to know me and I getting to know you all, you will know words mean a great deal to me. And I think when I hear the word outreach, I recognize all of the same things you've already named, right? You do, like, there's a whole history with that word. And so a little bit for me, when I think of outreach, with the caveat of, if you're not intentional, what outreach becomes is, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? What can I do for you? You don't need to do anything for me. What can I do for you? Let me stretch myself thin for you. Kind of situation. And I think when we look at the word partnership, there is a kind of collaborative spirit, there's a mutuality in that doesn't necessarily take away that usually on both sides they're not always equal, if we want to use those words, but as spiritual beings, as people of faith, I believe we recognize and have the opportunity to recognize there is always mutuality in something. We never give without receiving, and I think sometimes outreach does not encourage us to be mindful of that in the same way that hearing the word partnership can. So that's a little bit of the first kind of rumblings that rise for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to take a few minutes to give folks a chance to ask questions. So I have a few more questions.
Yeah.
If in the unlikely event they don't have a lot of questions for you, but I want to give you all a chance to offer thoughts and questions for Megan this morning.
I just, since you're at St. John's and now it's less safe than it was, because I couple out at CPT and Station Hope didn't happen because it's even, I just wondered what the situation was at St. John's. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Because it's a really neat space.
Yeah.
It is a neat space. I have not been abreast of anything that's going on at St. John's, which is which is sad. I only recently learned that it was not safe.
Right. It was never really safe, but now it's totally safe.
I mean, there was a lot of asbestos.
Are we talking about building issues, or are we talking about?
So
Okay, thank you.
the floor is not sound, and so you could fall through the floor. And the basement is not pretty, by the way. It's not a pretty basement.
We used both for Station Hope because it was a big set on that program.
Yeah.
Okay, is that basically what it was, and now we're just aware of that, or has it deteriorated since you were there? You might not know.
My understanding is it has definitely deteriorated, but there were a lot of building things that needed attention even when I was there.
Right.
But it was a lot of like, how do we triage these things? My understanding is after I had left St. John's, there was also this kind of trying to figure out what was next. And so, since no one was there daily, there was a little bit of a quickening of disrepair, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Gail. And I'm sorry, would you please introduce yourself? This was Bob Zumbar. And if you would introduce yourself so that Megan can know you.
I'm Gail Craddy.
Hi, Gail.
Tell us a little bit about yourself now, who you are, your family, etc.
Yeah. So, as BJ mentioned briefly, I am married. My wife Lindsay and I met in Toledo, and we were married 2 years ago. We have 2 cats. They're mine by adoption, and I love them as if they are my own. But I can say so I'm originally from Akron. And so I'm excited to be back on this side of the state. This is Lindsay's first time living on this side of the state, being so far away from her family also, actually, who are also in Toledo. So right now, we are in that space of constantly exploring. A lot has changed since I worked here almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
I know, I feel
Flies,
old.
isn't it? Yeah,
So at least personally with us, we're constantly exploring. I can also name, she has not received her transfer to Cleveland yet, so she is working in Toledo and coming to Cleveland on her days off. So she's here like once or twice a week, but her spirituality is very nature-based, and so we're really excited to be able to get out into parks, explore a lot of that way. We have been to Asia Town multiple times already, and we've been here for a month, so that we like noodles and dumplings. But is there anything particular?
What does she do? What is her business?
She is a postal worker, and she loves being outside. When I met her, she was doing communications. And when she left that job, she vowed that she never wanted to work like in an office again. And so one of the best things that she found that was available was being a postal worker and walking. So she loves to be outside.
The Book of Common Prayer on page 492 has prayers for a speedy spousal transfer. Open that up every day and pray for Lindsay and for Megan for the well-being of all. Audrey.
What neighborhood are you living in?
We are on the west side. I kept calling it Franklin Park because that's where we live nearby, but I think it's West Park is the actual name.
Okay. Yep.
So we are over there.
Shar. Oh, you did. I'm sorry. We didn't have an introduction.
Oh, hi, I'm Audrey. We've known each other for that decade.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Shar. And my brain just kind of went, kind of stopped. Early on in your talk about the dynamics with the two congregations, particularly the racial dynamics, and within the Episcopal Church, and I would love to hear more about that.
What would you love to hear more about?
I don't know, I guess, both for us as a cathedral and for us as a diocese, what do you see as our growing edge?
Assuming we have it. No, we do. You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
So I'm not sure that I have an answer for the cathedral yet, as I'm still learning and growing in understanding kind of our relationship to the wider community. I think, again, to kind of go back, the simplest thing is never the easy thing. And I think for at least the congregation that I was working with, there was a real desire for honesty and transparency about the lack of time, attention, and care that has been given to our historically Black congregations, because that's real. And some of the circumstances and situations that they find themselves are a direct result of that. But we don't talk about it enough, in my opinion. And then give them the space to name their feelings around it, to name their need around it. But I think that's what I would say in this moment.
I have a lot of follow-up questions that maybe we'll have to get to as we talk about it. I'm wondering if that's amplified by the physical distance of Cleveland to Toledo. And I also, in some of our conversations of which Shar has been a part, we have learned that the history of attention and inattention, it's like rings on a tree, because it sometimes connects to last Tuesday, and it sometimes connects to 50 years ago.
Right.
And when that kind of hits a point of feeling lesser than, that it takes a lot of trust and a lot of intention to begin to kind of figure out where those rings were formed, and then to be able to ready to respond. So I look forward to having that conversation, because I think we're really eager to be having. I saw another hand up, Sally.
I'm Sally Lambert, and welcome. And I'm not quite sure how to word this, but my question to you, you talked a lot about what you're bringing to us. What are your expectations from us as members to kind of help you through this process?
Oh gosh. Where are your name tags? Expectations are important. Name tags?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
So this is my own thing coming out, maybe coming out from the side, Adrian. that phrasing. But I think I would change expectation to hope. So my hope for the congregation, or how the congregation also journeys with me, would be with grace, patience, and holy curiosity. I think one of the things that sometimes gets really lost, but is also very challenging, is engaging, especially those things that we find challenging and hard, with a holy curiosity. And I can only imagine the joys, but also the challenges that we will experience together, that will require all of us to have patience with each other, to extend grace, but to also have this sense of, I'm curious. I'm curious to know X. I'm curious to understand Y. The letter Y. and Y. I am a geometry person. But I think that would be my hope. And I'll also name the reason why I don't name that as an expectation, is because I, even for my own hoping that I live into that, know how hard it can be. And sometimes naming, like, I expect you, Cynthia, to be curious. And if you're not curious, we're gonna have a problem. But I can say, Cynthia, I hope you will join me in being curious. And if she's not curious, I can pull on that grace and that patience for me to then be like, let's talk more about this. Let's talk more about why you're not even being curious. But that word choice says more about me than it does that.
Yeah, expectation, hope is better than expectation.
I can vouch for Cynthia's curiosity.
That last email that I sent you?
Hey, give and take. It's give and take. All right. Other questions? Are there? Oh yeah. Go ahead, Bishop.
I'm struck by. I'm Bill Purcell. I'm struck by the joy of having somebody, an African American, on the staff in a city that is predominantly African American, in a cathedral, of course, which is not. When I was here on the staff, I made a point of joining the Black clergy of Cleveland to get to really know people in the religious community. And I know we have an organization, a community action organization, that could bring some of it to happen. But what's your thinking about that, your relationship as African American at a predominantly white institution in a predominantly black city?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I just thought we were gonna hang out.
We're supposed to be on that.
Hello, gentlemen in the second row. None of us know.
So the first thing that rises for me, which I think is also true for my experience between Owens and St. Andrews, is, and this can be complicated, so I acknowledge that up front. It took me a hot second, but very quickly learned that as a person of color that works with predominantly white communities, that my role has historically and most likely will continue to be a bridge between the two. And I am okay with that, but that has been my experience in the past. And part of that has to do with my own upbringing and my own lived experience as a biracial person, kind of straddling the line between two separate communities, but there is a lot of gift to pull from Reverend Adrian's sermon, right? Like there's a space of liminality and there are lots of gifts that come with that and challenges. But I think for me, it being not, how do I say this? I've learned not to discredit that as a person of color, I can walk into spaces and have different relationships with people than someone else can. And that is both a holy, H-O, not W-H, gift. Not only a gift to me and a gift to that particular community, but also is a gift to predominantly white spaces that I serve. Because I think that there is, I think in the time in which we live, someone has to toe that liminal line. I don't like that phrase, but I'm gonna use it. And to be honest, I view myself as being that person in our context.
So you said you have some books to recommend for us, but if are there other cultural artifacts, books, movies, podcasts that would help, that are really meaningful to you? And I'll close with this question, that you might suggest we explore.
Wow. I don't really listen to podcasts. And something you will all hopefully learn, I do not do novel reading. I read more of what many people consider to be textbooks. Again, that says more about me than about anyone else. Trying to think. I'm trying to make sure I get the title correct. But there is one book that has been really helpful to me. And I've also encouraged other folks to read it. I'm gonna get the title wrong. But it's a book about having conversations around really hard issues, like race and sexual orientation, gender. I will get you the true name of the book, I promise. But it essentially kind of walks you through the phases of that holy curiosity. So, how to be aware of your values, how to enter into conversations where you're looking at your value system, their value system, and ways that you can engage with that, which I think has been really helpful for me, recognizing that BJ and I might have the same value, let's say freedom or loyalty, but our relationship with that is different. So it looks different when it comes out, but how can we greater connect on the fact that we actually have the same value? And use that as the starting point of how we have hard conversations. When I get the name of the book, I can see
It sounds like it might be in our chapter room.
It might be, but
Literally.
But it has been a really, it's a really interesting book to read in my opinion. But it has been really useful and helpful.
thank you, Megan. And thank you all. Just from what I'm hearing from some of the questions and I think some really wonderful enthusiasm, there's a sense of wonderful excitement about you as a priest and you as a person, but also the ministry you'll be doing and where we are as a cathedral and as a community. And I can feel that energy in the room right now. And so thank you for helping to bring that energy out of us.
Yeah.
And I look forward to where this is going to go from here. So thank you all. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.